For all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer, and everyone, 2017 is a wrap. I just want to first thank you guys so much for such a fantastic and blessed year. I couldn't have done all the great things we got to do this year without you, and most importantly, without God. Thank you so much for 2017, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell thing so you don't miss all of the great content I have planned for 2018. It's gonna be a blast, and we're kicking off January with the Halloween and Party Expo, aka HauntCon. So don't forget to hit the bell. Now, let's start talking about horror movies. 2017 had a whole slew of horror movies for all of us to enjoy and dive into. There were some good ones, there were some bad ones, and today we're going to talk about the best and the worst of horror 2017. Before we dive into my favorite horror movies of the year, let's talk about my least favorite horror movie of the year, and that, of course, has to go to The Snowman. Technically, The Snowman wasn't really a horror film per se, it was more of a crime thriller, but it still had horror elements with a serial killer involved, and I felt that it just was a huge bummer. I thought it was going to be one of my favorite movies of the year, and it turned out to be a huge flop. I almost fell asleep in the theater. Actually, I wanted to fall asleep. My grandma fell asleep a few times in the theater, and I obviously can understand why. This movie was super boring, slow-paced, just a beautiful film, though. A beautiful film, and it had potential to be a really great film, and it just failed. So I'm sorry, Snowman. I wish we could have got something better. I really was expecting more with Michael Fassbender and everything involved, but it just fell flat, so that was my least favorite of the year. Alright, so let's get into the list with number 5, which has to go to Annabelle Creation. I was a pretty big fan of Annabelle when it first came out. It freaked me out pretty darn bad. I actually ran out of the theater, so I was expecting a lot for Annabelle Creation, and I was so pleased when this movie came out. It was such a well-done movie. Not only was the acting really well done, and the filming, cinematography, whatever you want to call it, but the storyline was great. It tied into The Conjuring and to the other Annabelle movie. It was really well done. I thought it was actually pretty well-paced, suspenseful. It had great elements of horror in it, and I thought it was a really well-done movie. So congratulations, Annabelle Creation. You made it to number 5. Number 4 is going to a sci-fi horror. Technically, it's not fully horror, but is based off of one of the most famous horror films of all time. That's right, Ridley Scott's Alien Covenant. A lot of negative reviews and publicity came out about this movie, but I actually really enjoyed it. It had some really hard-hitting scenes. The theme of the whole movie was really intriguing to me. It was almost more of a mad scientist movie than it was an alien movie, but regardless, I really loved it. It was really on par with the original Alien, and I didn't grow up with the original Alien, but after seeing this, it made me more excited about the franchise as a whole, and I hope Ridley Scott will continue in making more Alien films after this one. I wasn't a huge fan of Prometheus. I thought it was rather boring, but this movie was well-paced, well done, and actually pretty darn scary. Good job, Alien Covenant. Number 3 has to go to Jigsaw. Jigsaw was the 8th installment in the Saw franchise, so automatically when you have a number 8 in the name, you've gotta expect some sort of badness to it. But shockingly, Jigsaw was actually really entertaining. I was really pleased. I was originally not going to see this movie in the theater, but after going to see it, I'm glad I did. This movie is really well paced, has a good twist ending, it has some scary scenes, but it's not overly scary, nor is it overly gory, and I overall really enjoyed it. There was a couple in the theater when I saw it that actually fell asleep, and I wondered how, because I thought it was a tremendous movie. I definitely want to pick it up on DVD, and it actually made me get even a Jigsaw pin, so that's pretty darn exciting. Though I really liked Jigsaw, and while it may be a better movie, at least in my opinion, than this one, I couldn't help but place it at number 2 just because of how iconic it was in 2017 and the fact that it really was an excellent excellent movie. It was scary, it had some funny scenes, it made throwbacks to the original TV miniseries, and of course, Stephen King's novel. I thought it was a really well-paced movie. It had some great, cuts, and especially with all of the many characters, they did a pretty good job on focusing on the characters we needed to, and giving a pretty good and interesting look at Pennywise. I felt like they could have dived into his backstory a little bit more, as some people weren't really sure of what exactly he was, but I thought this was a really well done movie and a staple of 2017 and horror as a whole. Before we get to number 1, I do have a few honorable mentions. These movies were pretty darn good, but they weren't enough to make it to the top 5. The first is Kong Skull Island, which I absolutely loved. It actually got me into the original King Kong films, which are really great. If you haven't checked them out, please do. The reason I didn't put it in this list, actually, is because I didn't consider it really a horror movie. Though the original, in its own right, was a horror film, I felt like this new one was more of an action with elements of horror and thriller in it, but I didn't really consider it a horror film, so I didn't put it on the list, but it was one of my favorite movies of the year. And now moving into the next one, It Comes at Night was another great horror film, pretty well paced and suspenseful. The only issue I had with it personally is that it's one of those movies that you won't really watch more than once or twice. Some movies that have a good twist ending and have a mystery, you can re-watch, kind of like the original Saw film. But with this movie, I didn't feel like I could do that. I might have to re-watch it one more time, and maybe I'll stand corrected. But this was, again, a really good movie, and you should definitely
go check it out!
And finally, my last honorable mention is gonna go to Split. M. Night Shyamalan has had an interesting track record of movies. I absolutely loved The Visit, and so I was really expecting a lot with Split, and I got a really interesting movie. My biggest issue was with the ending. Now, Shyamalan's endings are either hit or miss, and for me personally, this was a miss. The Visit's ending was a hit for me, but this movie, I don't know, it took it too far, I felt, and I don't know, it really didn't grab my attention as well as I thought it would have. But they are making a sequel, and I'm really excited to see where the story picks up and goes. And now, let's talk about number 1. Alright, number 1, the best horror movie of 2017. You probably see it coming, and while this movie does have many flaws, I'll admit, it is one of the best horror movies I've seen in a while. I think it could definitely be a classic, and it is Jordan Peele's directorial debut. That's right, it's Get Out. Get Out was suspenseful, eerie, funny, charming, and also horrifying all at the same time. It also had some issues within the film that it discussed, had a social commentary about it, and it didn't force anything down your throat. I thought it was a really well done movie, and I thought that the twist was actually very well put together as well, and I enjoyed the ending of the film, and that it kind of took more of a light-hearted ending than more of a serious ending, which I think was probably in its favor. I thought that 2017 was a fantastic year for horror films. Get Out and many other films made this year a tremendous year. So thank you to all the awesome horror directors out there making 2017 an awesome year. And I can't wait for 2018 with some many anticipated horror films, such as the new Cloverfield release and, of course, Halloween. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic New Year's, and leave a comment below as to what your favorite horror movie of 2017 was. I didn't get to see all of the movies, so if there's one I left out, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for watching, and remember, as always, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.